My life has always been about maps. Having spent 46 years in the mapping service, I was used to seeing the world from above: mountains, valleys, rivers, and settlements. All these elements added up to a single, understandable picture. It is a pity that family relationships cannot be mapped as easily on paper. There are no conventions for them to navigate. I built my house in North Ogden back in '73 when Ella was expecting our son. It was the happiest time of my life then. The house was spacious, with 3 bedrooms and a large living room where we gathered around the fireplace on cold winter evenings. Ella insisted on panoramic windows overlooking the mountains. She said we needed our own landscape, not just the ones I painted at work. 4 years ago, Ella left. Cancer left us no choice. It took her quickly and ruthlessly, not even allowing us to say goodbye properly. After 52 years together, I was alone in the house I had built for my family. The floorboards creaked at night, and the echo of my footsteps echoed through the empty rooms, reminding me of what I'd never get back. Tyler arrived 6 months after the funeral. He called in the middle of the night, his voice shaking, telling me Penelope had filed for divorce, taking the kids and the house. I offered to let him stay with me until he got his life together. After all, he's my only son. "It's only temporary, Dad," he said, bringing his suitcase into the guest bedroom that was once occupied by our rare guests. "A couple months tops until I find a new apartment." Those couple months stretched into a year and a half before Octavia came into our lives. Tyler met her at some financial planning conference, brought her to dinner at our house, introduced her as a co-worker. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Prescott," she said, extending her hand elegantly. "Tyler has told me so much about you." Octavia Barlow, tall with cold gray eyes and hair gathered into a tight bundle. Impeccable makeup, expensive suit. I'd have given her about 35, but there was something tough about her that made her look older. Tyler looked at her with adoration, like a schoolboy looking at his first love. "At 44, my son still doesn't seem to have learned to see through people." "She works in the marketing department of Pharma," he announced proudly. "She's in charge of promoting new drugs." I nodded and smiled, but something inside me felt wary. Perhaps it was the years of working with topographical details. I always noticed what didn't fit into the big picture. There were too many inconsistencies in Octavia. The smile that didn't reach her eyes, the appraising way she looked around the living room, the way she cringed when she saw Ella's pictures on the mantelpiece. 3 months later, they were married. A modest ceremony in the town hall, no guests or grand celebration. I gave them the table set that Ella and I had once received for our wedding from her parents. Octavia thanked me politely, but I noticed her whisper to Tyler, "Where are we going with this antique?" After the wedding, they were supposed to move out. At least that's what Tyler said. But then the excuses started. The real estate market was unstable, or the loan wasn't approved, or the job was too far from the neighborhood they'd chosen. "Dad, you don't mind if we live here for a while, do you?" Tyler asked one night at dinner. "Just a few months, 6 months tops. We'll save for a down payment." I agreed. After all, the house is big and I was lonely alone. Besides, I naively assumed that my daughter-in-law would help out around the house, maybe bring some life to these walls. How wrong I was. The changes began gradually. First, Octavia rearranged the furniture in the living room, explaining it as better ergonomics of the space. Then she replaced the curtains that Ella had so lovingly chosen with some minimalist blinds. "It needs more light," she said. "Besides, those old drapes collect dust and Tyler's allergic." Tyler had never had allergies. At least in his 44 years of life, he'd never once mentioned it. But now he was nodding, agreeing with every word his wife said, as if she were the ultimate truth. Then things began to disappear. Little things first. Ella's books from the living room closet, her collection of ceramic figurines from the windowsill, the embroidered doilies from the hall table. I'd find them in cardboard boxes in the garage or attic. When I asked about it, Octavia always had a ready answer. "We're just clearing space, Walton. The house needs to breathe." And then she took up photography. I returned from a walk and found that the family photos that had been on the mantelpiece for decades were gone. They were now replaced by some abstract figurines and candles. "Where are the pictures?" I asked, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. Octavia didn't even turn around, still flipping through the magazine on the couch. "I put them away in the album. They were collecting too much dust." "Put them back where they belonged," I said firmly. "This is my house, and these pictures were here long before you came along." She finally looked up, irritation in her eyes. "Tyler, talk to your father. she called out. My son came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel. What's wrong? Your wife removed our family photos. Tyler looked from me to Octavia and back again, clearly not knowing which side to take. Dad, maybe we should redecorate. It's been 4 years. 4 years is nothing when you're talking about 52 years of marriage, I cut him off. This is my house, and I want pictures of my wife in it. Octavia rolled her eyes. Tyler, explain to your father that we live here too, and that the pictures aren't going anywhere. They're in an album in your office. She specifically said your to emphasize that it's the only space she still considers mine. Everything else, in her opinion, already belonged to them. That evening, I went up to my office for the first time and turned the key in the lock. It was a small room on the second floor where I kept my maps, books, and personal belongings. I had never locked this door before. There was no need. Now it had become my fortress. The next day, Octavia announced that we needed a family meeting. We gathered in the living room. She took center stage on the couch. Tyler sat next to her, and I got the old hard chair. I think we need to set some ground rules for living together, she began with a tone she must have used in corporate meetings. Walton, we realize that this is your home. Not just mine, I interrupted. This is the house I built with Ella. It preserves our life together. She smiled that fake smile that never reached her eyes. Of course, that's what I meant. But it's just the three of us living here now, and each of us has to respect the other's space. For example, the kitchen is a shared area, and it would be nice if you didn't leave your pills and newspapers there. That was just the beginning. Over the next hour, Octavia essentially divided the house into zones, most of which turned out to be common, meaning they obeyed her rules. I was left with the bedroom and the study, with reservations. Also, Walton, it would be great if you wouldn't turn the TV up so loud in the morning. It keeps us awake, especially on weekends. TV. My only entertainment. The only thing that broke the oppressive silence of the early morning hours as sleep fled me. Even that she wanted to take away from me. Tyler had been silent the whole time, nodding uncertainly at times. I looked at my son, and I didn't recognize this weak man as the child Ella and I had raised, the one I'd taught to stand up for himself and his beliefs. One last thing, Octavia continued. Tyler and I thought it might be a good idea to update some areas of the house, like the bathroom, for example. It looks outdated. A bathroom I completely remodeled 5 years ago, just before Ella got sick. We chose the tiles together, every pattern, every shade. I'd laid it myself, wanting it to be perfect for her. No, I said firmly. We're not touching the bathroom. Dad, Tyler finally spoke up. Octavia's right. A lot of the house is outdated. We want to help out, make some repairs. With your money? I asked bluntly. They looked at each other. Of course not. They wanted me to pay to remodel my own house to their liking. We could contribute our share, Tyler said uncertainly. When you have the money for your own place, I answered, rising from my chair. Until then, it's just the way it is. I went into my office, closing the door behind me. Through the thin walls, I could hear Octavia reprimanding Tyler for failing to sway his stubborn father. From that day on, the real Cold War began. Octavia stopped even pretending to respect me or my wishes. She defiantly wrinkled her nose as she passed me, as if I smelled bad. Cooked only for herself and Tyler, leaving me to heat up frozen dinners on my own. Turned on music while I watched TV. Inviting her friends over unannounced, and they'd make a lot of noise until late at night. Tyler tossed himself between us, trying to keep the peace, but he was too weak to stand up to his wife. Sometimes when Octavia was at work, he would come up to me with a guilty look. Dad, I know it's not easy. Octavia's just used to a different lifestyle. Give her time. Time for what? To completely erase your mother from this house? He sighed, shook his head. You're being unfair. Octavia means well. For who, Tyler? For you? For me? Or for herself? I never got an answer. One day I returned from a walk and found the lock on my office door broken. Inside was chaos. Drawers pulled out, papers strewn about. The photo album that Octavia had supposedly put here was open, and several pictures were missing. In particular, the picture of Ella and me standing in front of the newly built house, holding the keys. I found Octavia in the kitchen. She was chopping something, methodically and precisely, like a surgeon in surgery. You broke in my office door, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We needed to find the deeds to the house, she replied, not looking up from the cutting board. Tyler wanted to know how long ago you bought it. I didn't buy it. I built it with my own hands. And if Tyler wanted that information, he could have just asked me. She finally looked at me, something cold and calculating in her eyes. You're not always adequate, Walton. Sometimes you forget things, mix up dates. That's normal at your age. That was a lie. I've always prided myself on my memory. Even now, at 78, I remembered the minute details of maps I'd worked on decades ago. I remembered all the neighbors' birthdays, phone numbers, dates of important events. Where's the picture with the keys? I asked bluntly. She shrugged her shoulders. I don't know what you mean. Maybe you put it somewhere and forgot it. In that moment, I realized that she doesn't just want to remodel the house. She wants to erase its history, my past, everything that ties me to this place, and then maybe even push me out of here. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how things had turned out, how my own son had brought a woman into our home who was destroying everything Ella and I had built, one step at a time, how I myself had let it happen, hoping for the best, not wanting to be alone. In the morning, I made a decision. I couldn't kick them out after all. Tyler is my son, but I could protect what I held dear. I began to gather up my most precious possessions, photos, Ella's letters, and moved them to the safe in my bedroom. I hung the key to it around my neck, next to the wedding ring I'd worn on a chain since Ella left. I started taking more walks, leaving the house all day, exploring North Ogden, sitting in cafes, chatting to old people in the park, anything to avoid coming home to be greeted by cold stares and fake smiles. At some moments, I caught myself thinking that I was 78 years old and hiding from my own family like a teenager from strict parents. It was bitter and funny at the same time, but I saw no other way out. Not yet, anyway. And yet this was my home. The house I'd built for Ella, where we'd lived most of our lives, raised our son, welcomed sunrises, and saw off sunsets. I couldn't just give up and let Octavia erase it all, turn our family nest into a featureless space to her liking. I felt like a stranger in my own home, but I was still its master. And sooner or later, I had to find a way to reclaim my rights. I just didn't know how I would do it yet. Every day I got farther and farther away from the house during my walks. At first it was short forays to the nearest park, where I would sit on a bench and watch the children playing. Then I began to explore the streets of North Ogden that I had previously only known from maps. The city had changed a lot over the years with new neighborhoods, shopping centers, and parks. It was like rediscovering a place where I had lived most of my life. That morning the weather was unusually warm for mid-autumn. I decided to walk to the old lookout on Ben Lomond Hill, where I had a spectacular view of the valley and the Great Salt Lake. When I was young, Ella and I would often go up there, spread out a blanket and have a picnic. She loved those views, said they reminded her of how vast the world was beyond our small town. The climb took me longer than I'd bargained for. At 78, my knees aren't what they were at 30. But I took my time, pausing, enjoying the silence and the clean mountain air. When I finally reached the platform, a man in his 50s was already sitting there. He was smoking, looking thoughtfully into the distance. "It's a beautiful view, isn't it?" I said, leaning on the cane I had brought with me for long walks. The man turned and looked at me appraisingly. "Yes, there is something peaceful," he said, putting out his cigarette. "Are you from around here?" "I've lived here all my life," I nodded, sitting down on the bench next to him. "And you?" "Just passing through," he shrugged his shoulders. "I'm visiting, old acquaintances." Bitterness flickered in his voice, but I decided not to ask. Everyone had their own secrets, their own painful stories. We sat in silence, looking at the city below. I pointed to the east side of North Ogden. "See that neighborhood with the red roofs? When I was young, it was just woods. Now it's a whole apartment complex." "Things change," the man said philosophically. "Some houses look like they've been there forever, though, especially the ones that people build with their own hands." I smiled involuntarily. "That's right. I built my house myself 48 years ago. A blue two-story with white shutters on Oak Street." The man turned sharply toward me. "With panoramic windows in the living room and a stone walkway to the porch?" I looked at him in surprise. "Yes, that's right. How did you know that?" He ran his hand nervously through his thinning hair. "Fate," he muttered, then held out his hand to me. "Quincy Holloway. I've heard a lot about your house, you might say." "Walton Prescott," I introduced myself, shaking his hand. "I'm surprised you know my house. Are you a friend of Tyler's?" Quincy grinned bitterly. "No, I'm not. He hesitated as if searching for words. "I know Octavia. My heart skipped a beat. Do you work at Astrofarm? No, he shook his head. Our acquaintance, of a more personal nature, or it was. We were married. I stared at him, unable to hide my surprise. Octavia had never mentioned a previous marriage. Tyler hadn't mentioned it either. Are you sure we're talking about the same Octavia? I asked. Octavia Barlow? Barlow now, he nodded. She used to be Holloway. 5 years of marriage before it all went to hell. He pulled a ragged wallet from his breast pocket and pulled out a photograph. It showed Quincy, looking younger and happier, hugging Octavia. She was smiling, not the fake smile I was used to seeing, but a genuine, sincere one. It was the same woman, but it was like a different person. When did you get divorced? I asked, handing back the photograph. 7 years ago, Quincy answered. But not amicably, as I'm sure she tells me, if she mentions me at all. He was silent, staring off into the distance. I didn't rush him. Something told me the story wouldn't be easy. I did 3 years, Mr. Prescott, he said at last, for securities fraud and forgery, which I never committed. Are you claiming you were wrongfully convicted? I claim I was framed, Quincy said firmly. And it was my beloved wife who did it. I looked at him closely. Either this man was a fine actor, or he was telling the truth. So much genuine pain and anger was in his voice. Tell me everything, I asked. Quincy sighed, as if gathering his strength. Octavia and I met in 2012, he began. I was working at an insurance company, and she came to apply for a policy. We had an affair, and 6 months later we were married. Everything was fine until I lost my job during the layoffs. Octavia had gotten a job at a small investment firm by then. He fell silent, taking out a new cigarette. His hands trembled slightly. She offered to help with the money temporarily while I looked for a new job. I agreed. After all, we were family. Then she started bringing home documents, asking me to sign one thing and another. Powers of attorney, insurance forms, some kind of investment statement. I signed them without looking at them. I trusted her completely. And these documents turned out to be forgeries? I assumed. Worse, they were real, but they were used for fraudulent schemes. Octavia and her boss were running a scam on the firm's clients' retirement savings. When the case came out, all the evidence pointed to me. My signature was on all the documents. My account was used for transactions. And Octavia was the prosecution's star witness. She testified against you? I was shocked, though. Given my familiarity with Octavia's character, I shouldn't have been surprised. Oh yes, Quincy grinned bitterly. She sobbed on the witness stand, telling me how I manipulated her, forced her to participate in a criminal scheme, threatened her. The jury believed her. Who wouldn't believe such a beautiful, inconsolable woman? He took a deep puff, let the smoke out. I was sentenced to 5 years, paroled after 3 for good behavior. By then, Octavia had disappeared from town, taking everything we had. The house had to be sold for next to nothing to pay the lawyers. When I got out, I had nothing but the stigma of an ex-convict. The story seemed unbelievable, but something about it rang true. The cold calculation I'd seen in Octavia fit the image of a man capable of such treachery. Why are you here in North Ogden? I asked. Quincy put out his cigarette on the sole of his shoe. After I was released, I started looking for Octavia. Not for revenge, I just wanted to understand why she did what she did. I found out she'd changed her name to her maiden name, taken a job with a pharmaceutical company. A year ago, a buddy of mine who works for a logistics company happened to see her in Salt Lake City. Said she was with a man. I hired a private investigator who found out she'd remarried to one Tyler Prescott and was now living in North Ogden. In my house, I added quietly. In your house, Quincy nodded. The detective took some pictures, described the house. I came here to see for myself, perhaps to warn your son, though I think he's too late. Octavia has a knack for ingratiating herself. You said you had evidence of her involvement in the fraud? I asked, remembering the chapter's plan. Quincy leaned over and pulled a thin folder from the backpack at his feet. All this time I've been gathering information. Found Octavia's former co-workers who knew about the scheme. Traced the money transfers. My lawyer says it's not enough to reopen the case. Too much time has passed, and some of the documents were obtained. Not exactly legal. But this has everything you need to figure out who Octavia Barlow really is. He handed me a folder. I opened it and saw copies of bank statements, signed photographs of documents, notarized witness statements. There was also Quincy and Octavia's marriage certificate, photos of them together over the years. Why are you showing this to me? I asked, leafing through the documents. Because you're her father-in-law, Quincy answered simply. And apparently you live under the same roof with her. If she married your son and moved into your house, she has a plan. Octavia never does anything without benefiting herself. I remembered how Octavia gradually took over the territory in my house, how persistently she inquired about the deeds to the property, how I once heard her discussing with Tyler the prospects of selling the house after remodeling. Do you think she's out to get my house? I think she wants to get her hands on everything, Quincy replied. The house, the savings, the inheritance. She's patient and methodical. First she gains her trust, studies the situation, then she strikes. With me, she waited almost 4 years. He got up from the bench. I can't prove my innocence in a court of law, but I can at least warn others. Take this file, Mr. Prescott. Study the documents. Decide for yourself what you want to do next. I left my phone number inside if you want to talk. I stood up too, feeling the folder tugging at my hand, as if it held something heavier than just papers. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. I'll take a good look at it. Take care of yourself, Quincy said gravely. And your son too. When Octavia realizes she has nothing more to gain from you, she'll just disappear, or do something worse. With those words, he walked away, leaving me alone on the observation deck with a folder of documents in my hands. I stood there for a long time, looking at my hometown below, at the rooftops, my blue roof somewhere among them. Meeting Quincy had stirred something in me. All the suspicions, all the vague anxieties I had felt about Octavia suddenly took shape. If even half of what he told me was true, my son had married a dangerous rogue. I walked slowly down the hill, feeling much older than my years. The file folder was safely tucked away in the inside pocket of my jacket. I decided not to go home at once. I needed time to think over the information I had received, to decide what to do next. In a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, I took the far table and ordered a coffee. When the waitress left, I took out a folder and began to methodically study its contents. There were bank statements showing transfers of large sums of money from account to account, the dates of which coincided with the dates in the indictment, a copy of which was also present. Testimony from investment firm employees who claimed Octavia had access to client accounts. Emails with instructions from her to Quincy, where she explained in detail what documents needed to be signed. Most compelling was a transcript of a phone call between Octavia and her boss the day before Quincy's arrest. In it, they discussed how to take it out on this idiot and get away with it. The voice on the recording, a copy of which was on a small flash drive, was undoubtedly Octavia's, the same cold, calculating tone I'd heard when she discussed remodeling my house. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. Quincy wasn't lying. Octavia had indeed set him up, used him as a cover for her machinations, and then betrayed him in cold blood when the case came to light. And now she was married to my son, living in my house, making new plans. I finished my cooled coffee and gathered the documents back into the folder. The next step was to verify the authenticity of these materials. For all their credibility, I couldn't rule out the possibility that Quincy had fabricated the evidence himself, driven by resentment toward his ex-wife. At the city library, I sat down at the computer and began searching for information about the Quincy Holloway case. To my surprise, it had gotten quite a bit of press coverage 7 years ago. I found several articles in financial publications describing the fraud scheme and the lawsuit. One article had a picture of Octavia leaving the courthouse, pale but collected, wearing a strict suit. The caption read, "Octavia Holloway, chief witness for the prosecution against her husband, leaves the courtroom after testifying." I then searched for information about Octavia herself. Her professional network profile claimed that she had graduated from a prestigious university with a degree in marketing, then worked for several large companies before joining Astrofarm 5 years ago. Nowhere was there any mention of marriage to Quincy or working at an investment firm. I decided to dig deeper. Using Octavia's maiden name, which I found in Quincy's paperwork, I found her old social media profiles. Most of them had long since been deleted or abandoned, but archived versions could still be found. And there, Octavia didn't hide her marriage to Quincy at all. On the contrary, she posted photos of them together, celebrated their wedding anniversaries, and called him the love of her life. The last such entry was dated a week before his arrest. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a headache clench my temples. It was all coming together. Quincy's documents, open source information, All pointed to the fact that Octavia was indeed hiding her past and was likely involved in fraud. It remained to be decided what to do with this information. The most logical thing would have been to tell Tyler right away, show him the evidence, open his eyes to the true nature of his wife. But I knew my son. He was blinded by love, or what he took for love. Most likely he would have dismissed my words as an attempt to break him and Octavia up. I needed something stronger, some irrefutable proof that would make Tyler see the truth. And that's when I remembered the invitation Octavia had mentioned the other day. Her parents were coming over for dinner later in the week. It would be the perfect moment to reveal the cards. If I had all the proof I needed, if I could present it not only to Tyler, but to Octavia's parents as well. Leaving the library, I called the number Quincy had left in the folder. "Mr. Holloway, this is Walton Prescott," I said when he picked up. "I verified the information you gave me, and I believe it to be accurate. I need your help." The evening of the day I met Quincy, I returned home later than usual. The file was safely hidden in my old briefcase. I'd taken it from the library on purpose, so as not to arouse Octavia's suspicion. The less she knew about my plans, the better. When I entered the house, there were muffled voices coming from the living room. I walked carefully down the hall, careful not to creak the floorboards, and stopped at the door, listening. "And you have to plan ahead," Octavia said. "My parents are very particular about these things, especially my father. Maybe we should order dinner from the restaurant." That was Tyler's voice, uncertain as always. "No, that would be inappropriate," Octavia said. "We should have home-cooked food in our own home. Technically, it's still my father's house." "Which we're sharing," Octavia interrupted him. "And after the renovation, it'll be our house. Anyway, that's what I want to talk to my parents about. Dad could help with the legal side, and Mom, she's got great taste. She can help with the design." I decided I'd heard enough, and I walked into the living room as if nothing had happened. "Good evening," I said, hanging my jacket on the rack by the door. Octavia quickly changed her expression from annoyed to politely distant. "Ah, Walton, you're back. We were just discussing plans for the weekend. Anything interesting going on?" I asked, sitting down in my chair by the fireplace. "My parents are coming on Saturday," Octavia said. "And my sister Penelope, too. We're having a family dinner." "Wonderful," I smiled, trying to look genuinely interested. "I'd love to meet your family, Octavia." She gave me a cold look. "Actually, I thought you might be able to help with dinner." "I'd love to," I nodded. "What do you want me to cook?" Octavia clearly hadn't expected such enthusiasm on my part. She glanced over at Tyler, who looked equally surprised. "Yeah, I'll make a list of dishes," she finally said. "My mother is on a gluten-free diet, and my father prefers his meat medium rare." "I'll keep it in mind," I assured her. Cooking had always been a hobby of mine. Ella often said that I could have been a chef if it weren't for my love of cards. It was true. I did love to cook and did it well. But in recent months, Octavia had methodically forced me out of the kitchen, claiming that my outdated methods were not in line with their modern preferences. And now she was suggesting that I return to the stove. Ironically. "Fine," Octavia hissed. "Then it's settled. Dinner for 6 on Saturday at 7 o'clock. I spent the next 2 days preparing for this dinner, but not only in culinary terms. I called Quincy several times, clarifying the details of his story, double-checking the facts. He agreed to be in touch Saturday night if I needed to confirm anything in person. I also scrutinized all of the documents in the folder, selecting the most compelling ones and laying them out in logical order. The marriage certificate, the photos of Octavia with Quincy, the transcript of the phone conversation, the newspaper articles about the trial. I put it all in a new folder I hid in my office. Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen first thing in the morning. Octavia had left a list of dishes and ingredients on the table, but I decided to make my own adjustments. If I was going to cook, I wanted the meal to be really special, memorable. I made beef steaks with rosemary sauce, baked potatoes with herbs, a salad with avocado and fresh vegetables, and for dessert, Ella's apple pie recipe, a gluten-free version especially for Octavia's mother. By 6 p.m., everything was ready. The table was set, the food kept warm in the oven, the wine chilled. I had changed into my best suit, the one I had once worn when I retired from the map bureau and was being honored for my many years of service. The file folder was safely hidden under the sofa cushion in the living room, where I could easily retrieve it when I needed it. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I heard Octavia hurrying down the stairs as she whispered something to Tyler, and together they went to answer the door. There were cheers, exclamations, the sound of kisses. "Mom, Dad, come in, please." Octavia's voice sounded unnaturally high and sweet. "Penny, how nice to see you." I came out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on a towel. "Good evening," I said hello as I approached the guests. "Welcome to my home." Octavia's parents looked exactly as I'd imagined, a well-groomed couple in their 60s, clearly accustomed to a certain level of comfort. The father was tall, with graying hair and a firm handshake. The mother is slender, with a look as cold as her daughter's, and a strained smile. Octavia's sister Penelope was younger, perhaps 35, but with softer features and lively eyes. "Mr. Prescott," Octavia's father nodded, shaking my hand. "Edwin Barlow, and this is my wife Vivian and my youngest daughter Penelope." "It's a pleasure to meet you," I said. "Please come into the living room." As the guests were seated, I noticed Octavia glancing around the room nervously, as if afraid that I might have changed something without her knowledge. Her gaze rested on Ella's family photo, which I had returned to the mantelpiece that morning. "Dinner is almost ready," I announced. "May I offer you some wine?" "I'd love some," Edwin nodded. "How long have you lived in North Ogden, Mr. Prescott?" "All my life," I answered, pouring wine into glasses. "I built this house myself, almost 50 years ago." "Good work," Edwin said approvingly. "Solid walls, good layout. Although, of course, it's a little outdated." "That's what we wanted to talk about," Octavia interjected, sitting down next to her mother. "Tyler and I are thinking about remodeling, or even selling it if there's a good buyer." I noticed Tyler tense up at those words. I guess they hadn't discussed that option yet. "Sell?" he asked again. "Octavia, we were only talking about renovations." "It's just one of the options, dear," she smiled at him. "Anyway, we need Dad's advice. He's a former real estate lawyer, after all." "I'd be happy to help," Edwin nodded. "The market is booming, and you can get a lot of money, especially for a lot this big." I watched the scene in silence, noting Octavia's deft manipulation of the situation. She had not yet announced her real plan, but I could already see its outline. Sell the house, take the money, perhaps buy something smaller and cheaper, and pocket the difference. "What do you think, Mr. Prescott?" Penelope asked, who had been silent until now. "It is your house, after all." "I prefer to discuss it over dinner," I replied with a slight smile. "Which, by the way, is already ready. Please come to the table." We moved into the dining room, where I set the table with the finest china Ella had ever chosen. Octavia gave me a disgruntled look, obviously not what she'd planned, but her parents looked impressed. "What a beautiful set," Vivian remarked. "Limoges porcelain?" "Yes, my late wife was a connoisseur," I nodded as I set the dishes down. The dinner began in a relatively relaxed atmosphere. The guests praised the food, discussed the weather, and asked Tyler about his work. I was mostly silent, watching Octavia, who was clearly nervous, waiting for the moment to get to the main topic. Finally, when the plates with the main course were empty, she coughed. "So, about the house," Octavia began. "Daddy, Tyler and I would like your opinion on the possibility of—" "Before we go any further," I interrupted her, standing up from the table, "I'd like to clarify something." All eyes turned to me. I walked over to the couch and pulled a folder from under the cushion. "Edwin, Vivian," I addressed Octavia's parents. "Before you give any advice about this house, I think you should know the truth about your daughter." Octavia turned pale. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "What I should have done a long time ago," I replied, opening the folder. "Telling the truth." I pulled out the first document, the marriage certificate of Octavia and Quincy Holloway. "Did you know that your daughter was married before Tyler?" I asked, showing the paper to Octavia's parents. Edwin took the document, frowning. "This is some kind of mistake. TV was never married before Tyler." "She was," I objected, "to Quincy Holloway, for 5 years. And not only was she his wife, but she'd framed him when their fraudulent scheme was exposed." "What nonsense!" Octavia jumped up from her chair. "Tyler, don't listen to him. He's an old man out of his mind." But I was already laying out the rest of the documents on the table. Photos of Octavia with Quincy, newspaper articles about the trial, bank statements showing the transfers. "Your daughter and her boss defrauded dozens of investment firm clients out of millions of dollars," I continued, looking into Edwin's eyes. "And when the case came to light, she testified against her husband, claiming that he forced her to participate in the scheme. Quincy served 3 years while Octavia changed her last name and started a new life." Silence hung in the room. Tyler looked at the documents with an expression of confusion and horror. Octavia's parents looked at each other, not knowing what to say. "It's all lies," Octavia finally said. "Someone had forged those papers." "Tyler, you don't believe that, do you?" But Tyler was already holding one of the pictures of Octavia hugging Quincy against the beach. "When was this taken?" he asked quietly. "It's photoshopped," Octavia shouted. "The old man is trying to pick a fight with us, don't you see?" "These documents say that you were married before me," Tyler continued, his voice getting harder. "And that you were involved in fraud. Is that true?" "Of course not." Octavia shifted her gaze to her parents. "Mom, Dad, tell him." But Edwin was scrutinizing the court documents, his face growing more and more grim. "There are dates, names, sums," he said slowly. "It looks very authentic." "That's because it's true," I said, and turned on the small tape recorder I had taken out of my pocket. Octavia's voice came out of the speaker, the same conversation with her boss where they were discussing how to set this idiot up. Her blatant cruelty, her calculating nature, it was all recorded. Octavia stood as if paralyzed, her face contorted with rage. "Turn it off!" she shouted, lunging for the tape recorder. I stepped back, letting the tape play to the end. When it ended, the room was silent. "TV," Vivian said quietly, looking at her daughter with horror. "Is it true? Is that your voice?" Octavia looked around like a hunted animal. Her eyes darted from one face to another, looking for support, but finding only shock and disbelief. "You don't understand," she said at last. "It was his plan. Quincy made me participate. I was afraid of him. He controlled my every move." "You don't sound particularly scared on the tape," Penelope said. "More like the mastermind behind the scheme." Octavia threw her sister a murderous glare. "Shut up, Penny. You've always been jealous of me." "And what was your plan this time?" I asked, returning to the subject. "Convince Tyler to sell the house, take the money, and disappear like you did with Quincy?" Tyler rose slowly from the table. "You talked about selling the house," he said, looking at his wife. "Even though you knew I would never agree to it. The house belongs to my father." "It's old," Octavia shouted. "He can't live alone. You said so yourself. If we sold the house, we could buy something new, modern, a fresh start." "And where would my father live in your plan?" Tyler asked. Octavia fell silent, clearly unprepared for such a question. We could find him a good place in a nursing home," she finally squeezed out. That was the last straw. I saw something change on Tyler's face, as if the mask he'd been wearing all this time was finally falling off. "You never loved me," he said quietly. "You only saw me as a path to money, to this house." "No, Tyler, you don't understand." Octavia took a step toward him, holding out her hand. "I really do love you. It's just..." "Just what?" he interrupted. "Just that you lied about your past? About being married? About being involved in a crime? Or that you planned to evict my father from his own house?" Octavia stood there, unable to find the words. Her perfectly thought-out plan was crumbling before her eyes. Edwin put the documents back in the folder and sighed heavily. "I think we should leave," he said, standing up. "Tyler, Mr. Prescott, we apologize. We didn't know." "Dad!" Octavia exclaimed. "You can't just walk away. You have to help me explain." "Explain what, Octavia?" Edwin asked sharply. "That you have deceived everyone again? That you haven't changed since you faked your grades in high school? Or since you cheated your professor in college to get a recommendation?" Octavia recoiled as if she'd been punched. "Did you know?" she whispered. "I always knew you were capable of lying," Edwin replied bitterly. "But I hoped you would change. That you would grow up, become a better person. I never thought you'd go this far." He turned to Tyler. "Again, we apologize. I hope you can, deal with the situation." Vivian, pale and silent, followed her husband toward the exit. Penelope lingered, casting her sister a strange look, a mixture of pity and disgust. "I always suspected you were hiding something," she said quietly. "But this is too much even for you, Octavia." When the door closed behind them, there was an oppressive silence in the house. Octavia stood in the middle of the living room, a grimace of rage on her face. "You ruined everything," she hissed, glaring at me. "You old, worthless..." "That's enough," Tyler interrupted her, his voice tired but firm. "Just enough, Octavia. Pack your things and leave." "What?" She stared at him. "You can't kick me out. I'm your wife." "The wife who lied to me about everything," Tyler replied. who planned to evict my father from his own home, who probably only saw me as a way to get access to money from the beginning. Octavia changed tactics, her eyes filling with tears. Tyler, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. I really love you. I don't think so, Tyler shook his head. I don't think you're capable of loving anyone but yourself. The words seemed to strike a nerve with Octavia, her face contorted with anger, her mask snapping completely. You are as pathetic as your father, she shouted. You think I wanted to spend the rest of my life in this wreck? With you, a loser who can't even stand up to his daddy? She grabbed a glass off the table and threw it at the wall. The glass shattered. Wine dripped down the wallpaper Ella had once picked out. I deserve better, Octavia continued to scream. I deserve a real life, not this slumbering here. Tyler looked at her with an expression that mixed shock with disgust. Pack your things, he repeated quietly. You have an hour. Tension hung in the air. The broken glass on the floor, the red wine slowly soaking into the light-colored carpet, the papers scattered across the table. All of it created a picture of destruction that perfectly mirrored what was happening to our family. Octavia's parents were frozen at the door, clearly torn between the desire to leave and the need to react in some way. Edwin Barlow, with his graying temples and perfectly tailored suit, looked as if he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. His wife Vivian stood beside him, pale and confused, her hands nervously fumbling with the strap of her expensive purse. Octavia, Edwin said at last, his voice sounding tired and broken. Is it true? All that is said here, is it really true? My sister-in-law, now ex-sister-in-law, I corrected myself mentally, stood in the middle of the room, breathing heavily like a hunted animal. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from the tears of rage she wasn't even trying to hide. What do you care? She snapped at him. You've already made up your mind, haven't you? You've already judged me without even listening to me. I'm trying to listen to you right now, Edwin replied, taking a step into the room. Just answer the question. Is it true? Octavia turned away, crossing her arms over her chest. It's not as simple as he made it out to be, she murmured at last. Yes, I was married to Quincy. Yes, there was that investment firm thing, but it wasn't my fault. Quincy manipulated me, forced me to sign papers, threatened me. Don't lie, Tavy, Penelope said quietly, stepping out from behind her father. Don't make things worse. Octavia threw a hateful look at her sister. How would you know? You weren't even there. I know you, Penelope replied simply. I know how you can manipulate people, how you make them do what you want. You've done it with me all our lives. You did it with my parents. And apparently, you did it with Tyler. Tyler, who had been standing silently against the wall until now, as if stunned by everything that was happening, finally looked up. I can't believe it, he said quietly. I can't believe I didn't see anything. All the signs were right in front of me. I wanted to walk over to my son, to put my hand on his shoulder. But something stopped me. Maybe the years of estrangement between us. Maybe the realization that right now he needed space to make sense of things on his own. It's not your fault, Tyler, Vivian said, raising her voice for the first time. Octavia had always had a way at convincing people, even us, her parents. Edwin sank heavily onto the couch, as if his legs refused to hold him up. I was so proud, he muttered. So proud of my eldest daughter, successful, beautiful career. I told my coworkers about you, bragged about your accomplishments. And all this time, he stopped talking, his head down. You've been living a double life all these years, Octavia, Vivian continued for him. First college and those forged recommendations then. Shut up, Mom, Octavia exploded. Just shut up. You don't know anything about my life. I know more than you think I do, Vivian replied with sudden firmness. You think your father and I are naive, blind, but we just wanted to believe in the best. We wanted to believe that our daughter wasn't capable of what people were whispering about. Whispered about what? Tyler interjected. Vivian glanced at her husband as if asking for permission. Edwin nodded slowly. There were rumors, Vivian began, sinking onto the couch next to her husband, that Octavia was involved in fraud at the investment firm where she worked, that she wasn't just a witness, but an accomplice, that she betrayed her husband to save herself. And you believed those rumors? Octavia asked bitterly. Did you, my parents? No, Edwin shook his head. We didn't. We defended you, denied everything. I even fought with a few old friends who tried to hint to me that you weren't who you said you were. He looked up at his daughter, tears in his eyes. I believed in you, Octavia. Believed that my daughter couldn't be. Like this. Like what, Papa? She asked defiantly. Successful? Smart? Able to get what she wants? Ruthless, Edwin replied quietly. Willing to betray the people closest to her for money. There was a heavy silence in the room. I could see Tyler looking at Octavia as if he were seeing her for the first time, and he didn't like what he saw. I loved you, he said finally. I really did. When we met, I was a wreck from the divorce, feeling like a total failure. And you made me believe that I was worth something, that I could be loved. I did love you, Tyler, Octavia replied, but her voice sounded unconvincing, like a learned phrase. You don't understand. I just wanted what was best for us. Best for us? He interjected. Or for yourself. When you planned to put my father in a nursing home, was that for our good too? Octavia didn't answer, only looked away. You know what the worst part is? Tyler continued. I would have believed you. Even now, even after all this evidence, a part of me still wants to believe that this is some kind of mistake, that you couldn't have done this, that the woman I loved wasn't just a fiction. You see? Octavia grasped at that phrase like a straw. You can feel for yourself that it's not so clear-cut, that there was something real between us. She took a step toward Tyler, holding out her hand. Give me a chance, Tyler. Give us a chance. We can start over, move away from here, forget about all of this. And how do you explain your past? I intervened. That you were married? That your ex-husband was in jail because of you? Octavia gave me a venomous look. You, she exclaimed. You've been digging up dirt on me all this time. What right do you have to interfere in my life? The right to protect my son, I said firmly. And your home. Your home, your home, she mocked me. That's all you think about. An old crumbling building that should have been torn down long ago and built something decent. It's not just a building, I countered, feeling the anger rising inside me. It's the house where my family grew up, where I lived with the woman I loved for 52 years, where my son was born and raised. Every floorboard, every brick holds memories. Sentimental nonsense, Octavia snorted. A house is an asset that can be sold, nothing more. And that's why you've never been a part of this family, Tyler said quietly. And you never will be. The words, spoken almost in a whisper, struck Octavia flat. She jerked back, and I saw the mask finally fall away from her face. Gone was the beautiful, confident woman she had so carefully portrayed. In her place stood an angry, calculating person whose features were contorted with rage. Who the hell are you to tell me this? She shouted. A loser who went back to Daddy after his divorce. A man who can't make a single independent decision. She looked around the room, shifting her gaze from one face to another. All of you are so pathetic with your principles, with your morals. What has she given you? You, she jabbed her finger at me, are a lonely old man clinging to the wreckage and the memories of a dead wife. You, now she was pointing at Tyler, are a loser who was abandoned by his first wife and couldn't build a life of your own. And you, she turned to her parents, are smug hypocrites who spent your whole life wanting me to be the perfect daughter without noticing what it cost me. Octavia, stop it, Edwin tried to stop her. No, Daddy, now you'll listen, she was almost shouting. You always wanted me to be the best, in school, in college, in my career, always bragging about me to your lawyer friends. But when I needed help, when I really needed support, where were you? Where was your reputation that you hold so dear? What kind of help are you talking about? Edwin asked, perplexed. Octavia laughed bitterly. Of course you don't remember. When I was almost expelled from my first year for plagiarism, who helped me? Not you, but me. When I lost my first job, who was there for me? No one. I was always alone, always solving my own problems. That doesn't justify fraud and betrayal, Octavia, Penelope said quietly. Many people face difficulties, but they do not become criminals. Oh, Saint Penny, Octavia grinned. Always so right, so virtuous. Tell me, sister, how far have you gotten with your principles? Are you still working in the same lousy clinic for a pittance? Still living in a rented apartment? At least I sleep well at night, Penelope replied. And I'm not afraid that one day my past will catch up with me. I'm not afraid too, shouted Octavia. You can do nothing to me, nothing. The statute of limitations on that case has long since expired, and all the rest of your evidence is just words. It's not about legal consequences, Octavia. Edwin shook his head. This is about you losing us, your family. Family? She laughed again, but there was nothing funny about it. What family? You were never really family. You were a stage set, a picture for outsiders. Look at successful lawyer Edwin Barlow and his perfect family. It was all a fake. Vivian sobbed quietly, covering her mouth with the palm of her hand. Edwin put his arm around his wife's shoulders, his face turning into a stone mask. I think we really should go, he said, helping Vivian up. Tyler, Mr. Prescott. Again, we apologize for all of this. It's not your fault, Tyler replied. It's not any of our fault that she's like that. You can't just leave, Octavia exclaimed. You're my parents. You have to support me. We have supported you all your life, Octavia, Edwin said tiredly. We have loved you no matter what. But there is a limit to even parental love, and you have crossed it. He turned to Penelope. Are you coming with us? Penelope nodded, but then paused, looking at her sister. You know, TV, she said quietly, I've always admired you, your strength, your determination. Even when you were cruel to me, I still looked up to you, wanted to be like you. She shook her head. But I see now that the sister I admired never existed. It was just a mask you wore. And I'm sorry, not just for us, but for you. Because in your pursuit of money and status, you lost the most important thing of all, the ability to love and be loved. With those words, she turned and followed her parents out the door. I walked them to the door, exchanging a brief but understanding glance with Edwin. In his eyes, I saw the same pain I felt myself, the pain of a father watching the destruction of his child's life. When the door closed behind them, there was a heavy silence in the house. Octavia stood in the middle of the living room, her shoulders slumped, but the fire of rage still burning in her eyes. Well, she said finally, turning to Tyler, looks like you got what you wanted. My family turned their backs on me. Happy now? I never wanted this, Octavia, Tyler replied quietly. All I wanted was honesty, a real relationship built on trust, not lies. Honesty? She snorted. Trust? Those are all pretty words, Tyler. They don't mean anything in the real world. The only things that matter are money and power. If that's what you really think, I feel sorry for you, Tyler said, shaking his head. You'll never know what it's like to really love and be loved. Spare me your platitudes, she snapped at him. I know exactly what love is. It's a temporary insanity, a chemical reaction in the brain that makes people do stupid things. I've seen love ruin lives, how it's made smart people make idiotic decisions. Like, how do you marry a woman who only sees you as a means to get a house? Tyler asked bitterly. Octavia couldn't find an answer. She stood there, breathing heavily, her hands clenched into fists. Pack your things, Tyler finally said, and leave. You can't kick me out, she said, but her voice was no longer as confident as before. I'm your wife. I don't think you will be for much longer, Tyler replied. I'll contact a lawyer tomorrow and file for divorce. On what grounds? She asked defiantly. What are you going to tell the court? That I didn't tell them about my past? That's not grounds for divorce. Deception and misrepresentation, I intervened. Concealment of material facts that may have influenced the decision to marry. Any court would take that into account. Octavia gave me a hateful look. You, she hissed. This is all because of you. If you hadn't intervened, if you hadn't started digging. Then what? I asked. Would you have continued to manipulate my son? Would you have gradually pushed me out of my own home? And then, when you had your way, disappear like you did with Quincy? You don't know anything, she screamed. Nothing. I know enough, I answered calmly. And Tyler knows now too. Octavia shifted her gaze from me to Tyler, as if assessing the situation. Her face changed slowly, the rage giving way to cold calculation. Okay, she said finally. I'll go. But don't think that's the end of it, Tyler. Don't think you'll get rid of me so easily. She turned and headed for the stairs leading to the second floor, to pack her things. She'll do something about it, I said quietly when her footsteps died down. She's not the type to give up without a fight. Tyler sank heavily onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. I know, he replied muffled. But whatever she did, it can't be worse than living a lie. I finally walked over and sat down next to my son, tentatively putting my hand on his shoulder. To my surprise, he didn't pull away. I was such a fool, Dad, Tyler whispered. Such a blind, naive fool. Don't blame yourself, I replied. Octavia is a master manipulator. She's fooled many before you. But I should have seen the signs. The way she treated you, the way she gradually changed house, the way she avoided talking about her past. I just didn't want to notice. Because you loved her, I said simply. Love sometimes blinds us. But there's no shame in that, Tyler. The ability to love is a gift, even if it hurts sometimes. We sat in silence, listening to Octavia pacing the upstairs room, to drawers opening and closing, to something falling to the floor. Every sound echoed through the house like the harbinger of an impending storm. The next few days passed in a strange daze. Octavia left that night, hailing a cab and loading 2 huge suitcases into it. She didn't say a word to me or Tyler as she left, just slammed the door so hard that the glass rattled. My son was up all night. I could hear him pacing his room, the floorboards creaking under his heavy footsteps. In the morning, I found him in the kitchen, unshaven, red-eyed, mechanically stirring his long, cold coffee. "Are you all right?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. Tyler looked up at me with a blank stare. "You know, the weird thing is, Dad, I feel a sense of relief. It's like a weight I didn't even realize was there is suddenly gone. And at the same time, it hurts like something inside me is torn." I sat across from him in silence. What could I say? Any words of comfort would have sounded fake. Instead, I was just there for him, letting him know he wasn't alone. "I called her parents," Tyler continued after a long pause. "I wanted to make sure she was okay, that there was a place to stay." "And what did they say?" "Nothing. They didn't pick up the phone. I left a message, but they didn't call back." I wasn't surprised. Edwin and Vivian Barlow seemed like people whose reputations meant everything. After learning about their daughter's past, they'd probably decided to distance themselves not only from her, but from anything that reminded them of the scandal. "And Penelope?" I asked. Her sister seemed more understanding. Tyler shook his head. "Same result. Subscriber unavailable." In that moment, I felt a prick of conscience for the first time. Yes, Octavia was a manipulator and a liar. Yes, she planned to use my son and drive me out of my own home. But now she was all alone, rejected even by her own family. "Don't blame yourself," Tyler said, as if he'd read my mind. "You did what you had to do. Sooner or later, the truth would have come out anyway." "But I could have chosen a different moment, a different way," I replied. "Not to make it public in front of her parents." "What other way?" Tyler grinned sadly. "She'd deny it. She'd convince me that you made it all up, that you were trying to destroy our family. And you know what? I'd probably believe her. That's how much she had me bewitched me." He stood up, poured the cold coffee into the sink, and poured a fresh one from the coffee maker. "I'm calling a lawyer today," he said firmly, "starting the divorce proceedings." I nodded, looking at my son with a new respect. Despite the pain and betrayal, he had found the strength to move forward, to make tough decisions. Maybe this experience, as bitter as it was, would help him grow stronger. That day, Tyler actually contacted an attorney and began gathering the necessary paperwork for the divorce. I didn't get involved, just watched from the sidelines, ready to support if needed. By late afternoon, I noticed that the house was quieter. Gone was the tension that always arose when Octavia was around. Even the air seemed lighter. Tyler and I ate dinner together, silent, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes between people who understand each other without words. The next morning, everything changed. Tyler's phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. At first, he didn't answer, but then I heard his voice from the next room, tense, agitated. "Octavia, stop it. You know perfectly well that it's all over." "No, I won't change my mind. It doesn't matter." When he came out into the kitchen, his face was pale. "She called," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "She says she loves me, that things can change, that she's ready for a fresh start." "And what did you say?" "That it was too late. That even if I could forgive the lie, I couldn't forget her. Wouldn't be able to trust again." He took a sip of coffee and grimaced, apparently burned himself. "She cried. Said her life didn't make sense without me. That she'd do anything to get me back." "Do you believe her?" Tyler thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No. I think she's just not used to losing. It's a matter of principle for her to get back what she thinks is hers." He was right. Over the next week, Octavia tried every possible way to get to Tyler. First, it was calls and texts, dozens, hundreds of messages ranging from pleading to threatening. Then she started showing up near his work, accidentally running into him at the coffee shop across from the office. Once she even came to our house in the middle of the night, banging on the door and screaming that she loved him until neighbors called the police. "She wouldn't stop," Tyler said after the incident. "We were sitting in the kitchen. It was 3 in the morning, but neither of us could sleep. She's going to stalk me until she gets what she wants. And what does she want? I asked. You or the house? Tyler grinned bitterly. I think it's the same thing for her. I'm the key to the house, to the inheritance, just property. You could file a harassment claim, I suggested. Get a restraining order. And what? Call the police every time she comes around? Tyler shook his head. No, there has to be another way. At that moment, I saw a familiar expression in my son's eyes, the same one he'd had as a child when faced with a daunting task. Determination, perseverance, qualities that he seemed to have lost during the years of his first marriage, and that were now, paradoxically, coming back to him through a second painful separation. The next day, Tyler took the next day off work and drove to Penelope, Octavia's sister. He returned late in the afternoon, but he seemed calmer than he had the previous days. She agreed to talk, he said, sinking tiredly into a chair. Unlike her parents, Penelope hadn't turned her back on her sister completely. They still communicated, though not as often. What did she say? I asked, handing him a cup of tea. That Octavia had always been like that, driven to the point of obsession, that their parents encouraged it, especially their father. He saw her as an extension of himself, his second chance. After all, her mother, Vivian, had forced him to give up his career at a big law firm and move to a small town to be closer to her parents. And he transferred his ambition to his daughter, I guessed. Exactly, Tyler nodded. Octavia knew from childhood that she had to be the best at everything: school, sports, later college and career. Any failure was seen as a disaster. And when she did fail, her father, he paused, searching for words. Dad wasn't abusive, no. He was just withdrew. Stopped noticing her, turned his attention to Penelope. For a child, that's probably worse than any punishment. I remembered Edwin Barlow's cold eyes, his obsession with reputation. Yes, such a man might well have unintentionally crippled his own daughter's psyche. And now what? I asked. Is Penelope going to help us? She'll talk to Octavia, try to convince her to back off, Tyler answered. But she's not sure it will help. Octavia sees this situation not just as a breakup, but as a defeat, and she hates losing. We went to bed that night in anxious anticipation. Something told me that the storm was still brewing, that the worst was yet to come. I was right. The next morning, the doorbell rang. A policeman stood on the doorstep, young, serious, with a folder of papers in his hands. Mr. Tyler Prescott? He asked when my son opened the door. Yes, that's me. You need to familiarize yourself with this. The policeman held out the document. It's a temporary restraining order. You are not to come within 500 feet of Mrs. Octavia Barlow Prescott, not to contact her in any way. Tyler took the paper confusedly. But why? On what grounds? Mrs. Barlow Prescott has stated that you are harassing, threatening, and endangering her life and health, the policeman replied in a steady voice. This is a temporary measure until the court hearing, which will take place in 2 weeks. There you will be able to present your version of events. This is absurd. I couldn't stand it any longer. She's following him herself, coming here in the middle of the night, making a scene. Sir, I'm just doing my job. The policeman didn't even look in my direction. Mr. Prescott, do you understand? You are not to try to see her, call her, text her, or ask anyone to do so on your behalf. Tyler nodded slowly, still looking at the document in his hands. Yeah, I see. Good. Sign here, please. The policeman handed him a form acknowledging receipt of the notice. When the door closed behind him, Tyler sank down on the living room couch, still holding the papers. She turned everything upside down, he muttered. She made herself look like the victim. That's absurd. I still couldn't believe what was happening. We have witnesses, neighbors who saw her coming here at night. That's the thing, Dad, Tyler sighed. She's manipulative. She probably told the police she came here because I threatened her or something, and now I can't even get in touch with her to clear things up. He stood up and started pacing around the room, clenching and unclenching his fists. This is her way of controlling the situation. If I disobey orders, I could be arrested. In the meantime, she'll play the part of the scared wife. We could get a lawyer, I suggested. Challenge the order. There's a hearing in 2 weeks, Tyler replied. I'll be able to present evidence of her persecution there. But until then, he didn't finish, but we both knew what that meant. 2 weeks of helplessness, 2 weeks during which Octavia could do whatever she wanted, and Tyler couldn't even object. Penelope called in the evening. Tyler talked to her for a long time, then went back to the living room where I waited for the news. Octavia talked to her today, he said, sitting down in the chair across from me. Said she filed for a restraining order because she was afraid of me, that I'd allegedly threatened her with physical violence if she didn't give up all claims to the house. That's a lie. I was outraged. Pure lies. Of course it is, Tyler nodded. But Octavia can be persuasive. Fortunately, Penelope didn't believe her. She knows her sister too well. Will she help us? Tyler shook his head. She can't openly oppose her sister. Their parents have already effectively disowned Octavia. If Penelope betrays her as well, it could end badly. I understand, I sighed. Family is family, no matter how hard it is. Yes, Tyler looked at me gratefully. He did. The next few days were a nightmare. Octavia was off the chain. She called my neighbors, telling them heartbreaking stories about how Tyler had allegedly abused her. She contacted his superiors, insinuating that he was unstable and dangerous. She even gave an interview to the local newspaper, exposing herself as a victim of domestic violence. And all this time, Tyler couldn't do anything. Any attempt to contact her would be considered a violation of orders and could lead to arrest. She wants me to snap, he said one night. We were sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching it. Wants me to break an order, to do something that would validate what she said. Don't do that, I warned. That's exactly what she wants. I know, he rubbed his eyes tiredly. But sometimes I wish I could just talk to her. To look her in the eye and ask her why. Why is she doing all this? What is she hoping to accomplish? She wants to take back control, I answered. All her life, she's been in control. Manipulated people into doing what she wanted them to do. And now you're out of her control and she can't stand it. Tyler nodded. You're probably right. But you know what the weirdest part is? Part of me still loves her. Part of me still misses the woman I thought she was. That's normal, I said softly. Love doesn't disappear overnight, even when we learn unpleasant truths about a person. Tyler smiled sadly. How did you cope, Dad? After Mom died? How did you learn to move on with your life? The question caught me off guard. Tyler and I rarely talked about my feelings after Ella left. I always tried to be strong, to not show my pain. Day by day, I answered honestly. Just kept breathing, moving, living. Sometimes that's all we can do, just get through another day, and then another. And at some point, you notice that breathing got a little easier. He looked at me carefully, as if seeing me for the first time. You know, I never really thought about what it's been like for you all these years. It's selfish of me, isn't it? I've been so preoccupied with my own problems, my divorce from Penelope, my work, then Octavia. I never asked how you were coping with the loss of your mom. You've been busy with your life, I said. That's normal, Tyler. You've had your own problems. But you're my dad, he shook his head. I should have been there for you. Support you like you support me now. In that moment, something changed between us. It was as if the wall, invisible but tangible, that had stood between father and son for years, began to crumble. Our conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Tyler answered. His face immediately changed. I see. Yeah, of course. Thanks for letting me know. He hung up and turned to me. It was my boss. I'm being suspended pending an investigation. Octavia has filed a formal complaint claiming I'm harassing her and endangering workplace safety. But that's absurd. You can't even go near her because of that stupid order. Exactly, Tyler grinned bitterly. But she knows where I work, and she can show up at any time. If I'm there, it could be construed as a violation of the order. The company doesn't want to risk a scandal, so... He didn't finish the sentence, but it was clear enough. Octavia was methodically destroying his life. First his reputation, now his job. What's next? This can't go on, I said firmly. We have to do something, find a way to stop her. But what can we do? Tyler threw up his hands. I can't even talk to her without risking jail time. At that moment, the doorbell rang. We looked around. It was late, almost 10 o'clock at night. Who could have come at this hour? I went to the door and opened it cautiously. On the threshold stood Edwin Barlow, Octavia's father. He looked weary, aged, but there was determination in his eyes. Mr. Prescott, he said, I need to speak to you and your son. It's about Octavia. I think it's time to put an end to it. It had been a month since Edwin Barlow had appeared on our doorstep. A month that changed everything. His visit was a turning point in our fight with Octavia. The former lawyer knew how to counter his daughter's tactics. He helped Tyler gather evidence of her false accusations, contacted the right people, and the restraining order was lifted before the court hearing. But the victory was bitter. Tyler's reputation suffered, and he was viewed with suspicion at work, despite his reinstatement. Some neighbors still believed Octavia's tales of domestic violence. Most importantly, Tyler looked exhausted, as if the whole story had sucked the life force out of him. That's why I wasn't surprised when he came down to the kitchen one morning with a determined look on his face and announced, "Dad, I'm leaving. Got a job in Portland. I start in 2 weeks." I slowly set aside the newspaper I was reading. "Portland? That's in Oregon, isn't it?" "Yes," he nodded. "I've been offered a position at a branch of our company. Not a promotion, but, a fresh start. Someplace where no one knows me. A place where there's no history. History." I understood him. I really did. It was hard to stay in North Ogden after everything that had happened. Too many memories. Too many sneak glances. Too many whispers behind my back. "When are you leaving?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "This Saturday," Tyler answered. "I've already found an apartment near the new office. It's small, but it'll be fine for me alone." I nodded, unable to say a word. My son was leaving me alone in this big house again. But this time it was different. This time I knew that he had to go, that it was the right thing to do. "Will you be coming for the holidays?" I finally asked, trying to smile. "Of course, Dad." Tyler put his hand on my shoulder. "And you can come visit me anytime. Portland is a beautiful city. You'll love it." I nodded again, thinking about the fact that I wasn't likely to ever take advantage of that invitation. It was a long drive to Portland, and in my 78 years, traveling was getting harder and harder for me. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Tyler was packing, finishing things at work, saying goodbye to the few friends he had left. I helped as much as I could, but mostly I just tried to stay out of the way, giving my son space to prepare for his new stage of life. The evening before we left, we sat in the living room. The rain was falling outside the window, drumming softly on the glass, the fire crackling in the fireplace. Tyler stared at the flames, shaking his whiskey glass thoughtfully. "You know, Dad," he said suddenly, "I want to apologize." "For what?" I wondered. "For everything." He made a vague gesture with his hand. "For bringing Octavia into your house. For not seeing what kind of person she really is. For not protecting you from her." "Tyler," I shook my head, "it's not your fault. She deceived you, like so many before you." "But I should have noticed," he insisted. "Should have seen the way she treated you, the way she tried to force you out of your own home." I sighed. We'd had this conversation more than once in the last month. Tyler couldn't forgive himself for his blindness, his unwillingness to see the truth. "Son," I said softly, "we all make mistakes. It's not what we do, it's what we do afterward that matters." "And what did I do?" He grinned bitterly. "Run off to another state, leaving you alone." "You're starting a new life," I corrected him. "And it's the right thing to do. You need it." We were silent, staring at the fire. In that moment, there was an understanding between us that hadn't been there in years. It was as if all the walls had fallen away, revealing the simple truth that we were family, and always would be, no matter the distance or time. In the morning, Tyler left. His car, loaded with his belongings, slowly pulled out of the yard and disappeared around the corner. I stood on the porch, waving until it disappeared from sight, and then went back inside. The house that was suddenly so empty and quiet. I walked from room to room, listening to the floorboards creak under my footsteps. Tyler's bedroom, now empty, with a neatly made bed and empty closets. The guest room Octavia had once occupied, where the slight scent of her perfume still lingered. The kitchen, where the three of us awkwardly ate breakfast, trying to ignore the growing tension. In the living room, I paused in front of the mantelpiece where Ella's photographs stood again. After Octavia left, I'd put them back where they belonged, all but one. The picture of Ella and me standing in front of the newly built house was still missing. Perhaps Octavia had destroyed it, realizing how valuable it was to me. I sank into my old chair, suddenly feeling every year of my age. The sun was gone. Octavia had disappeared from our lives. After the restraining order was lifted, and she had a tough talk with her father, she had stopped stalking and was rumored to have moved to Chicago. I was alone again in the house I had built for my family. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, listening to the silence of the house. Before, When Tyler and Octavia lived here, I had often dreamed of peace and quiet. Now, however, the silence seemed deafening. In the morning, I got up at first light, feeling strangely awake despite the sleepless night. I drank coffee, looked at the newspaper, and then did something I hadn't done in years. I took a map of the United States out of the closet and laid it out on the table. When I was young, I loved maps, not only creating them, but studying them. Ella and I often dreamed of traveling, planning itineraries, though we could rarely afford long trips because of our jobs and limited budgets. Now, looking at the map, I could feel something long forgotten waking up inside, a thirst for new horizons, new beginnings. I spent the entire day exploring the map, noting places I'd always wanted to visit. The Grand Canyon, which Ella and I never got to see. The coast of Maine she'd always dreamed of. The small New England towns with their colonial architecture and narrow streets. By evening, I had made a decision that surprised me with its suddenness and yet rightness. I would sell the house I had built with my own hands, the house I've lived in for almost 50 years, a house that held the memories of a lifetime. But now that house was more a museum of the past than a place to live. Every corner, everything reminded him of things that could never be brought back, of Ella, of the years when Tyler had been a child, of a happy family life, and of recent painful events, Octavia's manipulations, the fights, the revelations. I called Tyler that same evening to inform him of my decision. "Are you sure, Dad?" he asked after a long silence. "This is your house and you've put so much work into it." "That's why I'm sure," I said. "I built this house for my family, for my life. And now it holds memories, not all of them pleasant. Where will you go?" I smiled, looking at the map on the table. "I hadn't decided yet. Maybe the East Coast. Your mother always wanted to see Maine in the fall when the maples change color. At your age, starting over," Tyler started, but I interrupted him. "At my age, you can't put off what you really want to do," I said firmly. "I might not get another chance." After talking to my son, I felt relieved, as if voicing my decision had lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt freedom. Freedom from the past, from obligations, from having to conform to other people's expectations. The next day, I contacted a realtor. A young woman named Haley inspected the house, assessed its condition, and gave me a ballpark figure. The amount was impressive. Real estate prices in North Ogden had risen significantly over the decades. This money would be enough for a small house or apartment in any town on the East Coast. Plus, there would be enough left over to live on. "Are you sure you want to sell?" Haley asked when we finished looking at it. "It's a beautiful house with character. They don't build a lot like this anymore." "I'm sure," I nodded. "It's time for a change." She smiled understandingly. "You know, my grandfather sold his house in Idaho when he was 85 and moved to Florida. Said it was the best decision of his life. Lived there for another 10 years. The happiest he said he'd ever been." That story gave me confidence. If a man at 85 could start a new life, what's stopping me at 78? The next weeks passed in preparation for the sale. I sorted through decades of accumulated belongings, deciding what to take with me and what to keep. It proved to be an unexpectedly liberating process. With each box sent to charity or the trash, it was as if I was shedding a piece of the past. I paid special attention to Ella's personal belongings, which I still kept. Her clothes I'd given to charity long ago, but there were still photos, letters, small mementos she'd collected. I selected the most treasured memories to take with me, the rest carefully packed up and sent to Tyler. "Save it for your kids," I wrote in the note. "Let them know how amazing their grandmother was." Tyler called later that evening, his voice sounding excited. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "This means a lot to me." "I know, son," I replied. "How are you settling in?" "I'm fine," he said with a more upbeat tone in his voice. "The work is interesting. My colleagues are nice. The city is beautiful, especially now in the fall. I think you'd like it." "Maybe I'll stop by for a visit on my way to the East Coast," I suggested. "I'd be glad to," Tyler replied sincerely. After talking to my son, I walked out to the backyard. It was a warm fall evening and the sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, painting the sky with golden and pink colors. The apple tree Ella and I had planted the first year after we moved in was now a tall, sprawling tree laden with ripe fruit. I picked an apple and took a bite, savoring the sweet and sour flavor. Ella loved these apples. making pies and jam out of them every fall. I could almost hear her voice calling me from the kitchen, could almost smell the cinnamon and vanilla. But those were just ghosts of the past. The reality was that I was standing alone in the garden of an empty house, preparing for a new phase of life. And for the first time in a long time, the thought did not evoke fear or sadness, only a quiet acceptance and even anticipation. The first potential buyer showed up a week after the house was put on the market. A young couple with 2 young children looking for their first family nest. They walked through the rooms, marveling at the solidity of the walls, the spacious kitchen, the large garden. "A swing would fit perfectly here," the woman said, looking at a sturdy oak tree in the far corner of the garden. "The children will love it." Watching them, I had a strange feeling, a mixture of nostalgia and contentment. Perhaps this house will once again be a place where families grow, where children's laughter sounds, where new memories are made. That's exactly what I built it for once upon a time. They made an offer the next day, and I accepted without hesitation. The price was fair, and they seemed like exactly the kind of people I was willing to trust with my home. The deal was to be finalized in a month, the usual time frame for all the paperwork. During that time, I planned to decide on a new place to live and start preparing for the move. One morning, while looking at real estate listings on the East Coast, I came across an ad for a small house in a coastal Maine town. 2 bedrooms, living room overlooking the ocean, small garden. The price was quite affordable, especially considering the money I was getting for my current home. Without hesitation, I called the number listed and arranged a viewing. This meant I had to travel almost across the country, but strangely, the thought didn't scare me. It encouraged me. "I'm going to Maine," I informed Tyler when he called that evening. "I want to see a house for sale there." "In Maine?" He was surprised. "That's the other side of the country." "Exactly," I agreed. "New place, new people, new life." "But are you sure you can handle it on your own? It's a long way, and you don't know anyone there." "Tyler," I interrupted him. "I once built a house with my own hands, raised a son, worked for 40 years for the same company. I think I can handle moving to another state." He laughed. "You're right, Dad. Of course you can handle it. Just, take care of yourself, okay? And keep me posted." "I will," I promised. "And maybe you'll come visit me for Christmas. If everything works out, of course." "I will." He sounded confident now. "Yeah, I miss you, Dad." "I miss you too, son," I said, feeling a lump come up in my throat. The day I left, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that had witnessed so much of my life. The bedroom where Ella and I had spent so many nights was where I stayed the longest, remembering our conversations before bed, her laughter, the warmth of her hand in mine. "I love you," I whispered, as if she could hear. "And I always will. But I need to move on." I felt a light breeze touch my cheek, like a gentle touch. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe Ella really was there in that moment, giving her blessing on my new path. In the living room, I stopped in front of the mantelpiece where the photos still stood. One by one, I carefully packed them into the box I planned to take with me. The last one I took was our wedding photo. Ella in a simple white dress, me in a dark suit, both young, happy, full of hope for the future. "We've lived a good life," I said, looking at the photo. "And I'm grateful for every moment." When I left the house, I didn't look back. I knew that if I did, my resolve might leave me. Instead, I got in my car, started the engine, and drove slowly out of the yard. Ahead lay the road, a long, uncharted road leading to new horizons. At 78, I was beginning a new chapter of my life, and the thought filled me with a strange, almost forgotten feeling, the anticipation of adventure. I didn't regret my decision to reveal the truth about Octavia, even though the price was high. My relationship with my son, which had seemed hopelessly damaged, had actually grown deeper and more sincere after all that had happened. We had walked through the fire together and came out of it stronger. And now we were each starting a new journey. Tyler, in Portland, building a career and maybe one day opening his heart to love again. Me, heading to the East Coast, to the shores Ella had longed to see. The unknown was ahead, but I no longer feared it. Life had taught me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always a chance to start over. And as long as there is breath in my chest, it is never too late to take the first step towards new horizons. The road flowed in front of me. The sun was shining in a cloudless sky, and my heart was full of quiet, peaceful joy. I was driving towards the future, leaving the past behind, but keeping in my soul all the lessons it had taught me. And the main one was that it is never too late to change your life if you have the courage to take the first step.